Hey everyone, it's been a while. So about a month ago, I interviewed James DeAngelis from Sugar Pine 7. It was a great experience. I learned a lot, and while the focus was on podcasts because that was the homework assignment, I still think it was a pretty good interview. Sort of put it on the back burner for a little bit. I had a super busy month, filming things and writing things because I'm like nearing the end of my program at school, so it's kind of getting like a little intense. Got the big projects coming up, the thesi. So yeah, just got a lot of projects coming up, a lot of things I'm working on. So I haven't been able to put all of my focus onto this YouTube channel because I got school and I do have some of these big projects are for YouTube. They're just taking a little longer to execute. It's all very exciting stuff, and I hope you stick around and stay tuned to check it all out. Subscribe and turn on that notification bell to keep up with my uploads. Without further ado, here's the interview with James DeAngelis.
Hello, everyone. My name is James DeAngelis. I'm a filmmaker, director, writer, producer, podcast host. I have a weekly podcast called Beyond the Pine. And I'm here by request of Charlie's professor who gave this assignment.
How and when did Sugar Pine 7 become Sugar Pine 7? Like, was there sort of like a huzzah moment that signaled the start of it where you knew you had something special?
Yeah, so Sugar Pine 7 started back in March or April of 2017, along with my good friends, Steven Septic and Clay James. We had been making some videos together before that, and they started to gain some traction, and we kind of started to find our footing with what kind of content we wanted to make and what our kind of voice and message was. And so we didn't really have like a definitive plan going into it to rebrand or call ourselves anything other than just like, friends making videos. But it wasn't until our Sugar Pine 7 video where we went to the cabin and we saw a bunch of comments on the video saying, Sugar Pine 7 is the perfect name for you guys' group. And we were like, that is actually a sick name, Sugar Pine 7.
Now, to sort of jump into the podcast side of things, when and why did you start the Beyond the Pine podcast? Sort of just like what kind of started the whole podcast?
Sure. At the time, back in like 2017, everyone on YouTube had a podcast or was starting a podcast, and it seemed like a natural progression as far as the type of content that we did. And so after our first season ended, we decided to start our podcast, and I think it was good because at the time, our show, just a little bit of backstory for everyone who doesn't, for every single person in your class who I promise you doesn't know what Sugar Pine 7 is. Our show was like a fictional vlog series where we would kind of blend, normal vlog, like real life shit with these made up storylines and characters. And because, you blend those two things, a lot of the audience didn't know what was real and what was fake. And all that. And so doing the podcast kind of opened the veil a little bit and gave everyone like a look at behind the scenes and kind of who we were, our dynamic and shit, and just like how some of the ways that we came up with different content and just more behind the scenes stuff, an insight into that. And we just always had a good time doing the podcast every week. It's a very like, there's so many different kinds of podcasts, some are story driven, some are like narrative, some are episodic, where there's a lot of effort and research and time that goes into planning each episode. But I like to think of Beyond the Pine as none of that. And we just, we're a comedy podcast. The whole thing is just a couple friends, talking each week about whatever we want. So it's a little selfish in that way. But, it's just a good time. We get to talk about whatever we want, things that we want to do, what we've been working on, the occasional dipping our toe into a controversial subject that we have no business talking about, and very quickly realized that and backpedal out of it and talk about anything else. And yeah, we've just kept it going since Sugar Pine 7, the show happened. Steve left the podcast because he became famous on Twitch, and then and he was better than us, obviously, because of that. And so to this day, Clay and I do it every week, just the two of us, and we have a blast. So if you guys ever want to listen to a couple friends just hanging out and joking around, check out Beyond the Pine. Plug.
So then, how you touched on this a little bit with Steven leaving and all that, but how has the podcast evolved over the years? Like,
I think it's with creating anything. I think one of the most important things that you can do as a creator is know what it is that you're making. And we had kind of tried here and there to do more with the podcast in terms of like figuring out, okay, what segments do we want to do? Do we want to do segments at all? And I think since Clay and I have been at the helm doing it, just the two of us, we've kind of really realized and made our thing that we're just two friends that are having a conversation. Like, we might have some guests on here and there, and we might have more guided conversations, but in reality, like, what it is that makes it special is just our dynamic and our bidding, and that's what we've just leaned into. But yeah, no, I mean, that's the one constant, is that Clay and I have remained, and we continue to do our thing each week, pretty much. And I think it's there's a time and a place for all different kinds of podcasts. But I think having I like comedy podcasts. I like comedians that do podcasts because there's they tell stories, they talk about experiences, they roast each other, they bet. You know what I mean? It's a very like casual thing. And I think that that's a great form of entertainment and a great outlet for creatives, to just have that place that's a little bit more like laid back and casual versus performative and planned out and everything like that. And yeah, we have a blast doing it.
What are some of your favorite topics to discuss?
That's actually a hard question, because it is such free form, kind of the way that we record. But lately, we've been going back and watching older Sugar Pine 7 videos that we haven't seen in years. And I think that's been a really fun thing to do, because it's very nostalgic. Obviously, we're re-experiencing these videos, and we offer the director's commentary over it as we're watching it. And so that's been a lot of fun. But truly, I think one of my favorite things to talk about is just obviously the film industry, and because I've been working now dedicated film industry stuff for about 2 years now, and it's everything that I've been wanting to do my entire life. And so now that I'm there doing that, that's all I want to talk about, and things that we're working on and whatnot. And Clay's the same way, because Clay's a musician, and likewise, he's now been working dedicated in that field. So yeah, it's a lot of things that go on in the industry, and things that we work on and stuff like that. Stories, just goofy stories, or yeah, it's hard to answer that, because it really does change week to week what we talk about, because there aren't really topics. It's kind of just what we come up with that we want to talk about each week. And I know that sounds really bad. That sounds like these guys don't have any plan and they're not doing anything. But no, it works. It works sometimes.
If you click and you just vibe, you get the flow going.
Exactly. And that's the most important thing. It's like the basic principles of improv. Yes, and go ahead, say anything.
Do you see that plane flying only 100 feet above us?
Yes, and I don't, though, because I'm not in your room.
I don't know if that's
That was textbook improv, man. Yes, and no, I don't.
Yeah. I was about to say, I'm like, I'm not sure if that.
I think technically that was right, but
You did say yes, and they
Thank
never
you.
said they have to.
See?
They never said you can't say no after that.
exactly.
And then you mentioned that you're now like for 2 years dedicated to film, and Clay is dedicated to music. So does, or has rather, the Sugar Pine 7 or Beyond the Pine sort of acted as like a jumping point, or like sort of like a launching pad for this?
Yeah, no, it definitely has. Yeah, and that's how we had always kind of viewed it, you know, as a stepping stone in a way. And I think it has in many ways helped, you know, because things don't always help by offering a literal opportunity or something like that, but just the things that you learn and that you experience through different experiences, like they shape you, and they help you figure out what it is you want to do. They help you figure out what your style is. They help you get experience working on things, you know, and that's all just part of life. So I would say 100% Sugar Pine 7 has like directly brought me to where I am, and I know brought Clay to where he is, you know, and there are definitely, you know, things where like for example, you know, if someone, okay, here's a random fucking thing that just happened to me the other day. I was on Breakdown Express, which is like Actors Access, but like the casting director side of it, where you actually do casting and everything. And I was like on their, you know, like when you're on a page and there's like a little contact thing that comes up and you can like live chat with someone and ask them questions.
Right.
So I was asking him something and he answered my question. And then I was like, and he's like, do you need anything else? And I was like, no, thanks so much. And then he was like, no problem, man. Always down to help a water warrior. And I was like, what? No way. So in the show Sugar Pine 7, my character was associated with this made up thing called water warriors. So the fact that this random guy, like on Breakdown Express, like the IT support guy, like knew me, that was crazy.
In your latest episode, episode 239, you and Clay talked about your thoughts about doing a podcast remotely versus having a studio to go to. When Beyond the Pines started, now correct me if I'm wrong, if I remember correctly, you had a space to sort of go to for the podcast. And then now you're obviously doing it more remotely. What are the pros and cons to each?
Yeah, well, I would say pro 100% doing it in person, because you have this energy that's there in the room. You know, when you're physically next to the person, the energy is so much easier to feed off of. And it's just so much better, especially if you're doing it with a friend, like I'm doing with my best friend. And so being in the same room, you're immediately in a better mood. You're immediately just ready to jump in and do it. And I've always felt that way. Like doing something like that in person is just so much better. But obviously we started doing it remotely when COVID hit in 2020. And then that just became easier because, you know, we all lived in different places and whatnot. And then Clay ended up moving to another state. And so we obviously can't do it in person all the time because of that. So it's a means to an end, but I prefer doing it in person, and we try to do that every chance that we get, for sure. So I would say, like, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, especially if you're wanting to do it any sort of video too, it's just so much better for on screen kind of energy when you're doing it in person. Because no one likes looking at what you're looking at right now, two screens of two guys talking to each other. So, but you know what? Do what you can when you can. And yeah, I don't think that you should ever let obstacles prevent you from creating something. I think that, you know, because we like to tell ourselves excuses sometimes, like, oh, well, you know, I don't want to start the podcast until I have a space for it. And it's like, you don't need that right now. You just need to make a podcast and have fun doing it. Well, thank you for having me on as your guest on your interview. I hope I answered some questions for you. Good luck with everything that you're doing, my dude. I hope that you enjoy learning and experiencing and working and creating. And everyone out there, same goes to you. Follow your dreams. Follow your fucking dreams.
Almost.
Just do it. You want to know why?
Why?
Because you have to. I'm a firm believer in following your dreams. Almost aggressively.
Yeah, I'm like, I almost feel threatened right now if I don't.
You should. You should.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed. It's been a pleasure.